Today, I'm going to be showing you 3 of the very best value for money field watches I have ever seen. Morning, guys, and welcome back to I Like Watches. What makes these 3 field watches so interesting is they're all made by completely different brands. They all look completely different. They all house completely different movements. They're all completely different sizes, and yet they have one very important thing in common. They're all incredibly good value for money field watches, and in today's video I've got an awful lot to get through, so I'm not going to hang around. Let's head over to the light box and get on with it. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you enjoy this content, click that like button and subscribe. Right, let's go and get on with it. Right, here's the first watch I'm showing you today then. It is, of course, the Orient Defender 2. Probably the watch that most of you will consider the best value for money field watch out of the 3 watches I'm showing you today, because it contains the in-house automatic F6B22 movement. And as you can see, there's 3 complications on the dial. You've got a date at the 3 o'clock, a 24-hour subdial, which makes a lot more sense on this watch than it does on a chronograph, because this is a military watch. And then you've got a days of the week subdial as well at that's 10 o'clock, isn't it? 10 o'clock. Now, before this video ends, I'll be doing a lume comparison video between these 3 watches and putting them all inside of Herman, so make sure you stick around for that. And I'm also going to be showing you visually what 60 meters of pressure looks like. I'm going to put a balloon inside of Herman and pump it up to its maximum pressure, pump him up, I should say, to his maximum pressure. And yeah, you're going to be quite surprised to see visually what 60 meters of pressure looks like. So yeah, these watches are going to be well tested before the end of this video. Now, they have made a few changes between this version 2 and the version 1. They've moved the crown to the 3 o'clock position, and they've also changed the dial layout and the size and dimensions of this watch. I think I would have preferred it to be the same dimensions and sizes as the original Defender, slightly smaller and more compact. Although this is still fairly compact in terms of its case length, it is over 42 millimeters in diameter, but still incredible value for money. This is the most expensive watch I'm going to be showing you today. I picked it up for £115 plus import taxes, and so I think the vast majority of you will think this is the best value for money option out of the 3. But it's not without its weaknesses, unfortunately, which are, well, its size, dimensions. I think drilled lugs would have been nice, and the crown is a different finish to the case. I mean, these are fairly minor weaknesses, of course. I'm being a little bit picky, but yeah, the case is a sort of bead blasted finish, and the crown sticks out a little bit more than I think it needs to, because, well, it looks like a sort of stainless steel brushed, a slightly more polished, shiny finish, isn't it? Screw down case back, screw down crown, some specifications on the case back. 100 meters of water resistance. Nice strap as well, actually. Double pass nylon strap with matching hardware. So the finish on the hardware matches the finishing on the case. And the buckle is signed. So yeah, an incredible value for money watch. Let's slap it on the wrist. And here it is then on my roughly average 7¼ inch-ish wrist. The strap controlling the weight in the case very nicely. It's not too heavy at all. A touch too big, as I've already mentioned, but still super legible. Fingers crossed the lume will be pretty decent as well. And despite all those complications on the dial, yeah, a very legible field watch. So yeah, let's now move on to watch number 2. This is one of the latest releases by San Martin, and what makes this watch just so interesting is the movement inside here. It is the Seiko VH31, so it is a quartz movement, but look at that second hand. It is ticking 4 times every second. It is, of course, the same movement that was used inside that incredibly popular escapement time dress watch. I am thrilled to see San Martin using different movements inside of their watches. They recently used a very interesting Miyota 9000 series movement with some date complications on the dial. And yes, they're now using the VH31. This is quite a bit smaller, this field watch, and a bit dressier as well. Look, you've got a beautifully brushed case, but high polished around the domed, I think it's mineral crystal, this one, double domed mineral crystal. There will be some AR coating on it, and look at the hardware on the strap. Beautifully finished buckle with, again, a mix of brushed and polished finishing. Perhaps not the most appropriately finished field watch. San Martin do like to make beautifully finished watches, and their field watches are also equally beautifully finished, which I guess is sort of missing the point to some degree. But still, I guess if it starts off looking like this, it's not a bad thing, is it? Again, the hardware on the strap is matching the finishing on the case, which is nice. 18mm double pass nylon strap. Again, 100 meters of water resistance. It is a pull push crown, this one, but a screw down case back. No specifications on the case back, just a simple brushed case back, and a rather interesting looking hour hand. It stops rather abruptly, doesn't it? I'm not sure how I feel about that. It's very, very different. The minute hand is nice. It's sort of fairly typical, nice, long sword minute hand. Yeah, reaching right out to the outside of the dial, but then the hour hand just sort of stops. It's like it's been cut off. So yeah, that's a bit of an odd one. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the loom on this one as well. Compared to the Orient, it is printed directly onto the black dial. So yeah, I'm not so sure how well it will last. Now, I did produce a video recently showing you 2 San Martin watches, and I asked for some feedback for San Martin. They've been asking me to basically reach out to you guys because they want some direction for 2023, and I suspect for 2024. They've been producing a lot of watches recently, and I think they just want some help. They want to know where you guys want San Martin to go over the next year or two. So please comment in the comments section. What would you like to see from San Martin in the next year or 18 months or so? And they will 100% be reading the comments in the comments section. So now is your opportunity to let San Martin know what you feel about their watches and what you want from them over the next 12 months or so. Right, here's the San Martin then on my roughly average 7¼ inch-ish wrist. It definitely feels lighter and looks quite a bit smaller, doesn't it? Maybe a touch too small, but it definitely appears to be beautifully finished, which I'm not completely convinced is appropriate for a field watch, but still, you never know. There might be people out there wanting a slightly dressier field watch, which this certainly is. And the movement inside, VH31, fantastic to see this movement now being used by San Martin. I hope they use it in a lot more of their watches moving forward. Maybe that's something you could let them know in the comments section. Right, let's move on to watch number 3, the cheapest watch I'm going to show you today. Now, incredibly, you used to be able to buy this titanium field watch by Loris for as little as, get this, £25, but they have discontinued this watch. The all stainless steel version is still being made and is still readily available at ridiculously affordable prices, but this one is becoming increasingly difficult to find, especially brand new or unworn. I've just had to pay £69 for this, but I still think it represents decent value for money, and you never know, this watch could fall into that category of affordable watches that are discontinued, becoming increasingly difficult to find, and that are potentially increasing in value. I don't know how much more it's going to cost than £69 in the future. I suspect not much more because it is still a Loris quartz field watch, but still, a titanium field watch for £69, I still think that's pretty incredible, isn't it? And it actually feels all right. Obviously, it's quite light, quite small. The strap seems okay. The buckle is polished, unfortunately. No signature on it, so it doesn't look like the best quality buckle. But let's not forget, this watch was originally £25. I don't think the loom is going to be that impressive. It has 100 meters of water resistance again. Screw down case back and a pull push crown. Date complication at the 3. Nice bit of detail on the bezel as well at the 12, 3, 6 and 9, and it seems to be a very nicely brushed titanium case. Super slim as well, given the quartz movement inside. So yeah, 3 very, very different field watches as promised. Let me slap this one on the wrist. And here it is then on my roughly average 7¼ inch-ish wrist. It feels almost weightless, to be honest. A 2-piece nylon strap. It sits nice and flat to the wrist because you don't have any strap going underneath the case. A very delicate and slim field watch, but still, like I've said already, fairly legible and actually a pretty good looking watch, isn't it? Right, let's see how the lume compares between these three watches. I'm going to boost the lume with my UV torch and then film the degradation over a sort of 5-6 minute period, and yeah, let's see how they look afterwards. Well, I guess as you would expect, the cheapest watch hasn't performed particularly well. There's not a huge amount of lume on this watch anyway. It's just on the hands and it's basically completely disappeared. I think you would have expected the Orient to do the best because it has lume filled applied indices, which gives it a big advantage over the San Martin. The San Martin has lume applied directly to the dial, and although you can still see the lume on the San Martin, the lume on the Orient is still quite visible. Right, let's go and play with Herman. Now, I'm sure you're already aware there are a couple of different ways you can use Herman to test watches, and I chose on this particular occasion to use the slightly safer test where you increase the pressure while the watches are out of the water. That will force air into the cases. You then drop the watches inside of Herman, release the pressure, and then you have to interpret the results. You have to look at how many bubbles there are, and it does differ depending on which types of watches you're testing, but for a field watch, I wouldn't expect to see too many bubbles. And before I show you the test results, I'm going to show you what 60 meters of pressure looks like. I've filled up a water balloon with a little bit of air, popped it inside of Herman, and I've increased the pressure to the maximum 60 meters, or the equivalent of 60 meters. And I was shocked actually to see how much the air inside that balloon compressed. It gives you a visual example of what it's like for the watches inside these cylinders. Even at 60 meters, it seems to be compressing the air an incredible amount, actually, far more than I anticipated. Just imagine what would happen to that balloon or these watches at 200 meters. It just shows, doesn't it? Even these basic tests, I think, are a good indication as to whether or not you can swim with these watches, regardless of what these stated water resistance, whether it be 100 meters or 200 meters. I think testing them inside of Herman is reassuring if they pass, of course. Now, I tested the Loris first, and I'm pleased to say it passed with flying colours. I saw very few bubbles coming from the watch, just from under the crystal, under the spring bars, where air is trapped basically, and when you release the pressure you get 1 or 2 bubbles, which is to be expected. I tested the San Martin next. I'm going to come back to the San Martin. I then tested the Orient, and again similar results, a few more bubbles perhaps, but it's a bigger watch, and so more places, I guess, for the air to basically hide and then be released when you release the pressure inside of Herman. Now moving on to the San Martin. Don't forget, all of these watches are rated the same, 100 meters of water resistance. The Loris and the San Martin have pull-push crowns, and the Orient has a screw-down crown. All of them have screw-down case backs. Now, when I released the pressure for the San Martin, there were 2 or 3 bubbles that seemed to come from between the crystal and the case, and I have seen this many times before. In fact, it did happen on the Orient, but it was just one fairly small bubble. So are those bubbles coming from the front of the San Martin an indication of a breach or a failure? I wasn't completely convinced, so I performed the more dangerous test where I put the watch inside, or left it inside the water, and then increased the pressure back up to 60 meters. And I left it for a good 10-15 minutes or so, and then I released the pressure and I performed the ice cube test. I did, as recommended by a viewer, heat up all 3 watches. Actually, I did this test on all 3 watches so you could see how much condensation formed on the underside of the crystals after I'd put the ice cube on them. And I heated all 3 watches up exactly the same on my radiator, and then put the ice block on top of the crystals, and there was condensation forming on the underside of all 3 crystals. You would expect there to be more on the Orient because it is a bigger watch, a bigger case, more air inside that watch, therefore more moisture. But it was good to see that the San Martin had a small patch of condensation, but not enough, which would imply to me that this watch had failed any of the tests. That's how I'm interpreting the results. Let me know in the comments section what you think, and let me know in the comments section what you think of these 3 watches, guys. 3 very interesting field watches, all very different, but all incredible value for money.